Want to find your seat for the event of your choice but can't get one that fits your desire or your budget? Well, my friends, SeatGeek has you covered. SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show. With a list of over hundreds of events to choose from, SeatGeek will assure you that you won't miss your seat with the amazing view of your choice at the most affordable price. Whether it's looking for your best seat in the house of your favorite sports team, finding live concerts to get you closer to your favorite artist, or enjoying your spot at your favorite live shows, comedies, and more, SeatGeek has it all just for you. Go online to SeatGeek.com or download the app on your mobile device through Google Play and the App Store. And as a special offer before checkout, use promo code SNAKESPORTS and save yourself $20 off of your purchase of your first ticket and experience why SeatGeek is the most trusted ticketing app for your next event. Remember, that's SeatGeek.com and download the app on your phone with promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off and find your seat with SeatGeek.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
Okay, folks, as you already know, on a manic Monday, I am all for it here on the Snake Sports Talk Show, live from 303 Denver, Colorado. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening. We're live on all platforms known to man, Roku, iHeartRadio, and all social media platforms for you to like, follow, subscribe, and hit the bell button for all latest notifications on up-and-coming shows. I am locked in this week. Why? Because I've got double interviews tonight. I'm locked in with the Raiders with your boy Q. Q Myers going to be joining us, and Jake Mastroianni, Locked On Braves. I am all for it. Baseball, basketball, NFL draft Thursday night, guys. This is it. This is what we've been waiting for. Pull up a chair, get some popcorn. I am ready for the show to start. So there's going to be a lot of action going on. So, you know, as playoffs are starting to kind of get ourselves pretty spicy and dicey, they've been really, really good all up to this point. I mean, you kind of already knew what you were getting with the Denver Nuggets against the Lakers. The Mavs just kind of got exposed in game one against the Clippers. But I'll tell you this, the Stanley Cup playoffs have just been amazing, all except one. What the hell was that game last night between the Colorado Avalanche and the Winnipeg Jets? Listen, I've watched all Stanley Cup playoff games, and of course, me being a Vegas native, you know I got a rep on the Vegas Golden Knights, and you know I'm all here for it for great playoff action. But that game last night, if you did not hear an outrage of Denver fans just literally throwing Alexander Georgiev on the back burner, you were not seeing exactly what happened all last night. 13 goals altogether in the game. Final score was 7-6. Winnipeg, they pulled it off. I mean, it was atrocious from both the first and third period. I mean, listen, I love watching, nail biters and grinders and guys that are basically playing tooth and nail. But it just felt like the defense disappeared. It felt like the goaltending on both ends. And that's no excuse for a Vezina Trophy finalist in Connor Hellebuck to give up 6 goals that game. What kind of game were we getting? Listen, I know in all of our major sports, we love offense, right? We love goal scoring. We love touchdowns. We love points. That's why all of us play fantasy football for a reason. And we also do like scoring shots from three-pointers in the NBA. But come on, man. This was just atrocious on every level. And this was part of the concern I've said about the Colorado Avalanche. I know what I'm getting. Hyper-aggressive offense. I felt like at times The defense will show up in areas, and I thought the second period was much better on both ends. Only one goal scored. Unfortunately, it went Winnipeg's way, but I felt like that was the better period amongst the whole game because the first and third, I mean, you got 3-3 in the end of the first, and then it became 4-3 at the end of the second, and then that's when everything opened up. I mean, you got to clean this act up, but I'm kind of fearing a little bit for the Avalanche here because I love their offense. Their goaltending with Alexander Georgiev is what I've been talking about because if it's inconsistent, that's going to scare a lot of Avalanche fans out there, especially when you're rooting on a MVP season in Nathan MacKinnon. You've got a really, really good cast of characters from Mikko Rantanen and Casey Middlestat and all those guys who showed up offensively, but my defense disappeared and Georgie was avoiding the puck. Did you see him duck on one of the pucks that was shot pretty hard his way? Why would you duck? You're a goaltender. You're supposed to block up a lot of those shots. I mean, I just thought a lot of the NHL games I saw from game ones, I got either 1-2 goal leads or I got 3 or 4. I did not have 13 goals altogether in a night. It just kind of felt like it was one of those games. Both goaltenders kind of gave it away. I was laughing really hard when Winnipeg fans were literally chanting out at 7-3 in the third period and basically saying, pull your goalie. Your goalie wasn't even any good either. I mean, the fact that you had the audacity to lead 7-3, a 4-goal lead, and you gave up 3 goals in the third period and then just made everything all worse. I mean, Jared Bednar, I'm sure, almost popped a vein on the sidelines, and I'm just like, I don't blame him. I mean, you got to clean your act. I mean, Georgie, this is unacceptable. And then at the same time, Hellebuck, this is unacceptable. I know sometimes you kind of have to dust the dirt off your shoulders and get better in the second game. Hopefully, I don't see a game like that again. I love offense. We all do. We all love offensive scoring. That's what it's all about. But if you're going to play this right in the playoffs, I better see some solid defense and I better see some solid goaltending as well. I just felt like that was embarrassing on both ends. Offenses were great, but it should never have been this easy. So I thought all the rest of the games were great, but that was one. Only the second period I liked, but first and third, I was like, this is over. If I'm getting this all series long, I feel like this series is going to be ended shorter than I thought. So I think they'll clean their act up, and I think they'll get better at it from both sides. All right, so like I said, I've been locked on, and I have been on one today, and probably because I'm excited for the Thursday night game. So growing up, just a little side thing. Growing up as a kid, I loved listening to radio in my hometown in Las Vegas. I listened to 94.1. I've listened to 92.3. I've listened to so many different radio stations. And boy, was I lucky enough to listen to this voice coming up here, up onto the show, all about Raider Nation Radio. And joining us here, it's your boy Q Myers, going to be joining us here on the show. I got to tell you, Q, I am excited for Thursday night because this is finally when everything starts to make sense. How do you kind of anticipate this night? Because I'll be honest with you, the free agent market was outstanding. And I think this is going to be an unbelievable party and an unbelievable setting. How do you kind of view the NFL draft going on in Detroit Rock City on Thursday?
Well, the draft, to be full transparent, man, the draft is my favorite time of year. It really is. I get excited about the draft like you do. I just get to see all these other teams feel like that they got better. And we know some teams are going to get a lot better through the draft. And then we'll know other teams won't do so well. But it's like Christmas in April, right, for NFL fans. So I've always been a guy that grew up, on Saturdays and Sundays watching the draft all day long with my buddies and hanging out. And now it's obviously prime time starting on Thursday, like you mentioned. So, yeah, man, it's exciting. It's really fun. And, obviously I'm here in Detroit covering the draft for the Raiders for Raider Nation Radio 920. And I'm excited about the opportunity to see what the Silver and Black are able to do at pick 13 or wherever they decide that they're going to make a pick.
So going back to, the Raiders season, because obviously there was change in leadership, and thank God they found the one that they knew meshed in with the culture. Because like I've said before, the Raiders, for years and years since I've watched them during the rivalries, I'm on the opposite. I've been a Charger fan since I was 7, but I loved the rivalry for one reason, because the Raiders always seemed like they were the rebels of the NFL. They always stuck it to Roger Goodell and the rest of the league. And now having Antonio Pierce as a full-time head coach, I mean, I love the attitude he brings to the table. I think a lot of players have been very invested up in that. So recapping this, I mean, I think this was the right move for the Raiders to really bring aboard a guy who's a players type coach, much like what we saw in Houston. So I think this is honestly going to be a boost of what's to come this next up and coming season. Am I right?
I mean, yeah, that's what, Mark Davis was looking for when he made the move and he decided to put Antonio Pierce in that position as the interim head coach. He said he wasn't looking for a coach. He was looking for a leader. They needed leadership. The culture was broken in the locker room. He had talked to many different players that have big names like Josh Jacobs, Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, guys like that carry some weight, and they could see that there was something that was wrong with what was going on. So there needed to be a change. Mark Davis didn't know what it was going to be like under Antonio Pierce, but just had a gut feeling that was the right guy for the job because of the leadership qualities. And AP has wanted to be a coach in the league, and he's been a coach in high school and was a defensive coordinator there at Arizona State. And so he already had a little skins on the wall and kind of knew what it was supposed to look like. As you mentioned, as a player, obviously he knows what, how guys want to be coached up. So, with all that, he took the advantage of his opportunity and did really well. Had 9 games to coach up, went 5-4 down that stretch and earned the job as the head coach. So now him and Tom Telesco, a guy that are familiar with from his time with the Chargers, are now in charge of the Raiders and this next chapter. What do they do moving forward? How do they build this team? How do they get guys in there that are Raiders and fit with what Antonio Pierce wants to do, what Patrick Graham wants to do, who Luke Getsy wants to do now as the offensive coordinator for the Silver and Black. So there's a lot coming up, man, this week. This Thursday, Friday, and Saturday is going to be a big deal as far as the maturation progress goes in this team, building this team, trying to make it the best they can. But this is the fun of it. This is why I'm here. I'm excited about it.
Christian Wilkins, honestly, I felt like that was my favorite move of the free agency. Why? Because finally Max Crosby gets a solid number 2 right there next to him. I mean, how do you kind of outlook this defensive front line? Because you could just tell from the way that the defense rolls from the interior all the way to the linebacker and then to the secondaries. These guys play hard when Max Crosby plays hard, and all you needed was a solid 2 that complements him. How did you feel about this signing? Because, I mean, I've heard it from a lot of friends of mine, Raider fans. They absolutely loved it, and they're ecstatic to see what the duo does this next season.
It was the piece that Antonio Pierce wanted. He told us at the combine that he wanted a guy in the middle that can collapse the pocket. Big-time defensive tackle. Well, that's what Christian Wilkins is. Max Crosby brings it all the time. He doesn't take any plays off. He's always going 100 miles an hour. Even when he's injured, he's still going. He's that guy. Like, he always wants to be out there. Like he said, he didn't want to be great. He doesn't want to be a Hall of Famer. He wants to be a legend. And so he's trying to create that right now. The question of, someone across from him being his Robin has always been there. They tried to address that with Chandler Jones. Obviously that didn't work. They drafted Tyree Wilson, but he was the guy that everyone knew was going to be brought on kind of slowly because of the foot injury that he suffered at school. So now he's able to get healthy. He's coming on. He came on strong at the end of the season. Malcolm Kuntz really developed towards the end of the season, had his career year for him. And then you bring in that guy, Christian Wilkins, in the middle. And then you add Adam Butler and John Jenkins. You bring those guys back, re-sign them. That's a big deal. But Wilkins is going to be the guy. He's going to be the key. Patrick Mahomes, he's not going to want to step up in the middle of the pocket because Wilkins will be right there. He's not going to want to go outside because Max is going to be right there. So now you create a big monster along that defensive line. And the Raiders' defense was the strength of the team last season. So now you have the opportunity to have your defense that was your strength be that much better with an addition to Christian Wilkins. He's still young, so he's not like he's an old dude just collecting a check. He's a young guy. He has that opportunity to really continue to grow and be who he could be, and do it with Max Crosby. It's going to make Max's job that much easier. It's going to make Christian's job that much easier as well.
Gosh, I am so excited for just a premier defense that finally, I mean, it's like I've been kind of dying for the Raiders to finally get something that will at the very least help to boost them from the previous ranks that we've been watching them for the last few seasons. So now that we kind of get an idea with the defensive side, let's talk about offense from here, because now they have a new kind of role with Lou Getsy. Now, I think the tenure in Chicago, it's unfortunate because Chicago has not been able to figure out offense for, I don't know, since probably their existence. But, in the end, you got Devontae Adams. You've got at least a couple of real good players. Now, it's unfortunate losing Josh Jacobs in the middle of this, but how do you kind of anticipate Lou Getsy to really run this offense? Are you going to kind of see a little bit of some creativity, or how do you kind of play this out?
That's a great question, right? And I don't think we know the answer to that until we see it, because what happened in Chicago wasn't very good. And I know that when he was hired, it wasn't something that everyone was thrilled about because of what happened in Chicago. It's like, wait, hold on. He wasn't able to succeed in Chicago with Justin Fields. Now he's going to come and succeed with Aiden O'Connell or maybe Gardner Minshew or maybe another quarterback that they could draft coming up in the next couple of days. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. I know what Antonio Pierce wants to do. He wants to run the hell out of the ball. I mean, that's just kind of who he is. He wants to be that guy that's running the ball downhill. You saw what Josh Jacobs was able to do after Antonio Pierce took over on November 1st. It really became a Josh Jacobs show. So I'm assuming that Zamir White's going to get a lot of burn. He's going to be the feature back this year for the Raiders. Alexander Madison was signed as a free agent, so he'll be a guy that spells them. I expect them to draft a running back as well. I think they're going to be heavy with the run game, but ultimately you got to put up points, man. So whether it's Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, or other, that quarterback's going to have to be on point with his receivers, his weapons out there, whether it's Devontae, Jacoby, Michael Mayer, whoever the case may be. They got to be on the same page and be able to get an offense that clicks, because that offense last year that they had didn't click, and they did the best they could after McDaniels got fired, but they were still working with McDaniels, his playbook. They had an interim offensive play caller, so there was a lot of inexperience. And now, by the way, Aiden O'Connell was a fourth-round rookie quarterback that only had one start under his belt before he took over on November 1st. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to fix. They need to do a lot of repairing, a lot of heavy lifting on the offensive side of things.
So going to this draft Thursday night, I mean, I've been saying it at the start. I think this is honestly an NFL draft I don't think I honestly have ever seen, probably since 2020 and maybe further and beyond. I mean, there's going to be mixtures. There's talks about quarterbacks. There's talks about offensive tackles and a loaded wide receiver room. I mean, anything could be a possibility up to this point, but I've got my third and final mock draft as well later on in the bottom half of the hour, but kind of evaluating with the Raiders right now at 13, because a lot of this quarterback talk and a lot of these wide receivers and offensive tackles, how do you kind of feel is anticipating with the room right now with the Raiders? They kind of feel a little comfortable, or is there kind of a little bit of some rumors that might be shaking up here?
I mean, I think that I think everything's on the table, to be honest. I mean, they're in a position where they can do a lot of different things. We heard from Tom Telesco today, the Raiders GM, and, he said we have a plan to be aggressive and move up if the time presents itself, an opportunity presents itself. They can do that, and I'm assuming, and I think anyone in Raider Nation is assuming, that if they do move up, it's to try to find a way to go get Jaden Daniels, which is going to be very difficult to do. But if they do aggressively trade up, like Tom Telesco said, I'm assuming that that's who it'd be for. They can stay there at 13. They can pick the best offensive lineman. There's multiples that they could choose from. They need to address the right side of the offensive line. So I can see Fuaga out of Oregon State being an option for them. They have other guys there. Latham out of Alabama they can go for. Guyton out of Oklahoma they can get probably a little bit later. But and there's guys that they can address that offensive line with. I think that cornerback is something that they're looking at, like Terrion Arnold from Alabama, Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo. I think those guys are firmly in play. And I think that there's a lot of different players that are going to be there available. Even Byron Murphy. I know defensive tackle is not a position to need, but man, you want to talk about having another dude along your defensive line. I mean, that's a bloodthirsty pirate right there in Byron Murphy. I think that he would really add to the Raiders defensive line. So they're in a position where, in my opinion, they can't really mess it up unless they just really mess it up. And I just don't think with Tom Telesco and his experience that he has at this, I don't think he's going to mess it up. So I think the Raiders are going to come away with somebody pretty good on Thursday that Raider Nation will be pretty happy with.
So it's funny you bring that up, because a lot of my evaluations for the Raiders in general is because, knowing Tom Telesco in his track record, he's hit on, wide receivers. I mean, I know a lot of people kind of go from recency bias with, Quinn Johnston, but it's like you can't really, condemn the kid because of his rookie season that just didn't really pan out. There was coaching issues. There was all sorts of stuff. but he's responsible for Justin Herbert. He's responsible, for a lot of really good key factor players. So it kind of brings a lot of really good confidence in the, in the Raiders war room. But my evaluation looking at the Raiders, love your thoughts up on this. So if you mentioned about cornerback, because that's exactly with what I thought that the Raiders would do. My first mock draft, I had them taking Terry and Arnold. My second, I had them taking Quinion Mitchell. But my third mock draft, and this might be interesting, I had them maybe potentially taking Nate Wiggins. I'm starting to hear some good things about that. I just think because with the Raiders, quarterback, depending on it, I mean, there's some quarterbacks that could fall in the second, third round. We've been hearing a lot of some hidden gems up in there. But I think from corner, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt like the corner was the need because you got to help a little more of that secondary because, I mean, especially when you got your safeties with Trayvon Merrick and you've got, Epps out there in the secondary. I think adding a boost to the corner could really help to solidify to help the Raiders make a solid shutdown secondary, especially if you're playing really good offensive receivers and you're trying to disrupt the quarterback play. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've firmly been in the camp of, a Terrion Arnold or a Quinion Mitchell for a long time. I actually mocked Terrion Arnold to the Raiders just the other day. And one was because I do think that would be a big upgrade in their secondary, go with Jack Jones and Nate Hobbs. And Antonio Pierce told us that. He told us that at the Combine. He said, hey, we need an alpha dog to go across from Jones and Hobbs. I mean, he literally told us that. So, yeah, I think that's something that needs to happen, something that they need to grab. I'm more of Mitchell or Arnold guy as opposed to a Wiggins. But, I mean, I guess you pick your flavor of whatever you choose, whatever you prefer. I think Wiggins will probably be the last corner taken in the first round. But, I mean, again, he's a first-round corner, so I think he's still really good. It's just not the one that I'm looking at. I think if you're going to get one at 13, you either get Arnold or you get Mitchell, whichever one's there. Also, there's a nice relationship that AP has with Terrion Arnold. He had that at the Combine. You saw it at the Pro Day. So Antonio Pierce, from what I know, really likes guys that he has good relationships with. He's good at building those. He was, the defensive coordinator there at Arizona State, but he was also their recruiter. So he built relationships. That's who he is. He likes to go and base a lot of his decisions off the relationships he's built. That's why he pounded the table for Jack Jones when he was cut by the Patriots. The Raiders picked him up off of waivers. He knew him. Hey, I knew this guy since he was 13 years old. I knew Jack when he was little. I recruited him to here. I recruited him to there. Wanted him on the Raiders. And now, he's got a really good corner in Jack Jones. And, that's why they're trying to get Jaden Daniels. Same thing. Recruited him when he was in high school. So he knows him when he was a little kid. So there's a lot of ties that Antonio Pierce has around the league, especially with these guys coming into the league this year. Even has a relationship with a guy like Brandon Ayuk in San Francisco right now because he was there at Arizona State. So, I mean, there's a lot that you can kind of tie back to Antonio Pierce, which is making this even more exciting for the Raiders because you just don't know what direction that they'll go. But they have a lot of different options that they can definitely choose. Cornerback, I believe, has got to be one of them.
So I would assume, because honestly, when I look at the draft, I said it when I watched Quinion Mitchell from like his game film at Toledo and then watching him at the Combine, I feel like he is this year's Tariq Woolen that we got from Seattle because he's a ball hawk. He's a guy that's a big time disruptor. And I think that's a guy that I think he's honestly going to be the sweet deal right there for any of the defenses trying to boost up and really kind of disrupt opposing offenses. So the AFC West, lots of things have been shaking up. Now we know that Denver found their guy in Sean Payton. Now the Chargers found their guy in Jim Harbaugh, and they're sitting at 5. That's going to be an interesting night for sure. There's lots of different, predictions, lots of possibilities. I mean, the Raiders have to really shake this up. I think that's kind of the thought, right? You go into an AFC West. I think the West is going to be much more competitive than what we got last season. I mean, from due to injuries, due to inconsistencies all around in that division. So I think AP and Tom Telesco is probably looking at this thing like, not only do we got to ace this draft, but we got to have guys that bring in juice, that bring in attitude, and the guys that are ready to shake the tables in this division, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal is to beat the Chiefs in the division. The Chiefs will own the division. I mean, I don't care if it's Denver. I don't care if it's the Chargers. I don't care if it's the Raiders. The Chiefs own the division. So you've got to find a way to beat them. Antonio Pierce understands that. The last game the Chiefs won or lost was against the Raiders on Christmas in Kansas City, and that was because the Raiders were able to score 2 defensive touchdowns. That's something that you can't count on all the time. So for anybody who gets excited about that and says, oh, man, look, they got the recipe. Not really, because 2 defensive touchdowns aren't going to happen consistently. You've got to find a way to consistently beat those dudes. So that's why you bolster the defense. That's why you go get a guy like a Christian Wilkins. That's why you go add an alpha dog into the secondary. That's why you go and make sure that the back end is taken care of. You make sure that those linebackers are where they need to be. The defense has to be solid. You've got to slow down Patrick Mahomes if you can. Also, on the other side, you've got to be able to score. If you can't score, again, you can't rely on 14 points defensively to win you games. It's not going to happen consistently. So you might get lucky every once in a while and win on Christmas and your fan base gets fired up. That's awesome. But if you want to be a winner consistently, you've got to find a way to compete and score with Patrick Mahomes. And we know, we saw him in the Super Bowl. He can score when he needs to score. So the Raiders have to figure that out. But the division should be competitive. All these coaches are going to get after each other. These teams are going to get after each other. The Chargers have a winner. Peyton is a winner. Obviously, Andy Reid's a winner, and Antonio Pierce won as a player. So, I mean, there's winners all over the field and all over the division. They just got to figure out what's going to happen, how it's going to all shake out. You know, the Broncos added Zach Wilson to the mix today, and, you know, that's another quarterback in the room. But as far as I'm concerned, it's just another quarterback in the room. So obviously they're still going to try to address their quarterback position at in round 1 on Thursday at pick 12, unless they try to move up and go get somebody. So yeah, man, it's going to be a lot of moving going on in the whole division, not just with the Raiders, but all the teams as they're trying to compete with those guys named the Chiefs.
Yeah, man. I mean, the energy and the vibe, man. I'm excited for this up on Thursday night, and I'm excited for what's to come, you know, in the next season. I think it's going to be great. I think a lot of teams, there's a lot of wants, there's a lot of needs. There's a lot of stuff that also, too, could really, really shake things up. Fire question here before I let you go. Do you have a sleeper in mind? And it could be anybody up onto this draft, but do you have somebody in mind that could really take the league by surprise?
That's a good question. The guy I've been talking about a lot is Byron Murphy, just because I think he's really good. And the defensive tackle group is not that deep in this draft. And you see all the veteran defensive tackles, how much money they're getting paid. Christian Wilkins, we talked about him a bunch, how much he got paid from the Raiders, almost $100 million. Chris Jones just got $100-something million from the Chiefs, right? You're seeing Matabuke got paid a lot of money from the Ravens. All these defensive, even Leonard Williams got paid a lot of money, and he's not even really, performing and putting up that kind of numbers right now in Seattle, but he got paid as well. So Byron Murphy is a guy that I'm really intrigued to see where he goes. I think that he's going to be a hell of a player. And like I said, if the Raiders were to grab him at 13, I wouldn't be mad at that either, even though it's not a need. As far as guys that could just, end up really showing out in the league and nobody's really, talking that much about him. I mean, I'm looking at a guy like Blake Corum, the running back out of Michigan. I think that he's a dog. I like what he brings to the table. I love the fact that he could have left and gone to the league and decided to return and go and win a national championship there at Michigan, even though he had that knee injury that sidelined him at the end of the last year. And so I thought that was really cool. Dylan Johnson is another running back that I'm looking at out of Washington. I think that's part of the reason why Michael Penix wasn't very good in the final in the national championship game is because he didn't have Dylan Johnson. He had a high ankle sprain. So he's a guy that I think could be a really good player. He's not the fastest dude, but he's just a guy that'll get you all the tough yards in between the tackles. So I look at him to be a good player, and he's probably going to be a late round pick. Trying to think, Spencer Rattler is a guy that people are talking about. Jordan Travis could be a very intriguing player as well. He hurt his lower leg. He's the reason Florida State didn't make the playoffs in the college football. And he could be, once he's healthy, he could end up being a sneaky pick for somebody. But Spencer Rattler, I like him a lot. I was really down on him when I saw him at Oklahoma. I was wondering what was going on with him after all the hype. And he goes to South Carolina and turn things around. He's got a lot of people talking about him right now. So those are a few players that I'm looking at that could end up being big impactful players in the league.
Yeah, I think, a couple of them on my mind. I mean, a lot of people are just kind of sleeping on Bo Nix, but I just feel like because of the experience, the college starts, he feels a lot like a Sean Payton guy because especially when he had Drew Brees, I think this totally works for him. A lot of people, they kind of think, well, he doesn't have the accuracy, doesn't have the arm. But usually when you go into situations like this, they could change up, they could adjust their game, and I think that's where they're going to get the most of it. I think a couple of them like Jalen Wright and Marshawn Lloyd, I've watched these running backs, and they've got great cuts. They've got great vision when it comes to evaluating the offensive line and the opposing defenses where they're setting. And when they burst through on that afterburner, they are gone. And these guys are going to be really, really interesting to watch. But I think a really good one, and Byron Murphy's a real good one that I've watched as well. But I honestly do think I'm curious of what the second round receivers are going to be like. Xavier Legette. I think the size, I think the hands, and I also do think he kind of gives me a little bit of like an A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf type, but he's got a better head on his shoulders. And I think, honestly, he'll be a guy that some teams might be looking at if they're looking for size, they're looking for contested plays, a guy that's really going to attack at both of those. So I think he might be an interesting one, but there are so many of them, and I think that's what's so exciting about the draft Thursday night, but I cannot end up waiting for it. Q, absolutely love the work that you do, man. Where can people find you for everything Locked On Raiders and where they can also tune in on your radio station, man?
Yeah, you got me Raider Nation Radio 920, 2 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. Unnecessary Roughness every day. Of course, the Locked On Raiders podcast, anywhere you find your podcast. We're on YouTube. Of course, that's the video side of things, and then the audio, wherever you get your podcast from. On Twitter, at your boy Q254. You could always find me there. And then even Instagram, I'm starting to do a little with that. At your boy Q Sports, you can find me there as well. Like I said, just doing a little bit of dibbling and dabbling there, but I'm always doing something. And then ESPN Radio as well. Game night, 7 to 10 p.m. Pacific time. I do that too. So do a little bit of everything.
There you go, man. Hey, by the way, tell JT the Brick I said hey, man, because I've been on his show multiple times, expressing my thoughts. Love the work that you guys end up doing there for Raider Nation Radio. Keep up the great work. Excited for what the draft night is going to be. Good luck to the Raiders. And, man, we are excited to see what lies ahead for the Raiders moving forward. Thanks, man. Take care of yourself.
All right, brother. You too. Appreciate you, my man.
Absolutely. Well, we're shifting on from the NFL and, of course, Major League Baseball. I've been saying it, early on. So much outrageous stuff, but I don't usually react to a lot of things because it's still early in the season. We got a lot of baseball left. You just got to be there up on the grind. But you know what? I'm chopping it away, and I'm sure my guest is as well with the Atlanta Braves. So joining me here, Jake Mastroianni. Well, I'm curious of your thoughts, Jake, because honestly, I love baseball. I've grown up a baseball kid. It's been around in my family for years, former ball players. And, we've honestly have just loved the game because it's what shaped my life, honestly, when it came to, everyday life tackles and all that is what I respect the game so much. But, this outrage when we come to, fans that we know the umpires are not calling up the right strikes. It's pushing more for robotic strike zones. The umpire play, something's really kind of got to give. I know it's early on, but it's like if I'm going into postseason and then I'm going into the later stretches, hopefully something's got to give for some of these guys, right?
Yeah, you would think that would be the case. Look, Aaron Boone got thrown out of the game today. He didn't even say anything. It's just umpires are out of control right now a little bit at the moment. As far as the strike zone goes, I think the technology is just to a point where it's almost a little unfair to umpires because we're seeing it in real time. We got a little box on our screen that tells us, hey, it's a ball, it's a strike. And it's a little, it makes it, I think umpires maybe look a little worse than they actually are. Look, they are bad. I think they're especially bad early in the season. It feels like at the beginning of every year, it's like this, where umpires just seem incredibly bad. And just like, players, they got to just get back in full season form here. But look, with the technology that we do have these days, it's why put that added stress and pressure on them if you have the technology to get it done? Now, I'm not at a point where I am full electronic strike zone, but the challenge system that they've been playing with in the minor leagues, I think is a no-brainer. I don't know why that's not there now, where you get 3 to 5 challenges a game just to get rid of these terrible calls. As a Braves fan, obviously, first start of the year for Max Fried. He's in trouble in the first inning. He's struggling, bases loaded, has a 3-2 or a 2-2 count to Nick Castellanos, throws a pitch middle, called a ball. He goes on to walk Nick Castellanos, ends up giving up 3 runs in that inning, doesn't make it out of the first inning. That changed everything about that game. It's changed everything about Max Fried. He's still trying to overcome the ERA that he got from that game. He also gave up 6 runs in the first inning against the Diamondbacks, but still, that changed a lot, and it could have been fixed very easily. Everybody in the stadium knew that was a strike. All you do, you tap the head, they look at it upstairs. It's very quick. It's a strike 3. innings over. So again, changes are coming. The technology is there. I think the challenge system is going to be in here. You got to get approval, obviously, from the players on it, but it seems like a no-brainer. It seems like something the players would want. And for me, it really just is about the egregious misses. And that's what replay was about for me in the beginning too. It's not the ones where you gotta slow it down frame by frame. Did he beat it? Did he get the tag? Did he come off the bag? It's the ones where it's just clear to everybody, either out or safe. It's a ball, it's a strike. That's what I'm looking to really eliminate.
Yeah, honestly, because I mean, like no major sports is perfect. Every single one of them has a flaw. I mean, the NBA is dealing with the flaw with the the one and done deal, and then the NIL, and then at the same time, it's like foreign players are running this league. So they're not as perfect. They're trying to find what the next domestic star that's out there. The NFL sometimes when you look at referee calls, they're not as perfect, but they try to be as accurate as possible. I feel like with Major League Baseball, it's just like if you don't have the consistency sometimes and the accuracy, a lot of times there's where the games that could have been ended up a different result. And I've always said this for years. Umpires, we know it's a hard deal, but we also know they're the ones that basically try to control the game any way they can. And sometimes they give you a little bit of a notion of, this is how this game's going to be played. And I think a lot of managers and a lot of teams kind of feel that. So eventually, I'm not one that's big on technology either. I like accuracy and I like a little bit more of efficiency, but sometimes I'm also a mixture of the morale of the game, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly what you want. Look, you want the calls right. I mean, and that is what you hope for in the end. Another thing that baseball has to deal with is pace of play, something that they've improved on tremendously. And you don't want to take steps back in that with adding all this extra replay and that taking up more time. And that's where, baseball is lacked against some of the other sports because it's just not as fast paced and it takes a lot longer. Sometimes you don't know how long. There's not a clock. Or there is now, I guess, for the pitch clock in baseball, but there's not a set time that the game has to end. And like it does in the NFL and NBA. So you don't want to take away from that. But in my mind, it is about getting it right. And you're correct to the point where an umpire can say, okay, I'm going to give 2 inches off the plate tonight. And that's just what it's going to be. And the other team may not know that going in. It may take 2, 3, 4 innings for you to figure that out. I don't get that. Look, if you made a mistake in the first inning, continuing to make that mistake throughout the game is not the correct thing to do to me. And to do in my mind. I'll say this, though, and maybe I'm just biased as a baseball fan who mainly just watches baseball. I cannot watch other sports. NBA, that, in my mind, officiating is so much tied into the momentum and the aspect of a game, and it is I mean, that's why home games are so much easier to win in the NBA. In NFL, it is so affected by the crowd, the momentum. I personally can't watch the NBA. I think the officiating in that is terrible. NFL, what's a pass interference? What's not a pass interference? What's a catch, what's not a catch. So again, I am a baseball fan, so I'm a bit biased, but in my mind, I feel like it's much worse in other sports. But in baseball, it's just so hard to call in general. You got guys up there throwing 97 with movement. You got guys up there spinning sliders, breaking balls off the plate. I feel like it is such a harder sport to judge and to call. Any help, like I said, that you can give them, I'm all for it, but it has to be quick. Again, coming back to my original point on this, it has to be quick. We cannot go back to having a slow-paced baseball game that takes out a lot of the casual audience.
And it's funny because, and I agree with you 100% because I feel the same exact way. And sometimes when I even look at it from, body language from the umpire, sometimes when they make that mistake of a call, sometimes, and usually smart ones, because it's usually that back and forth pendulum swing and you're trying to keep it all balanced. Sometimes when I see them make a mistake, they often make a call on the other ends to where they try to make up for the mistake and try to balance the pendulum. So, like I said, not all these things are very perfect, but if you keep the efficiency balanced, that's where we're going to have ourselves a much more balanced game, and we'll have the breakdown of it, which is exactly like what we do on an everyday basis. So going to the Braves. So, I mean, I've honestly have loved the look of this team. I mean, the fact that winning the World Series against the Astros and then having just that next few years of dominance, at least on their side. Yet now they've got competitions with the Fightin' Phils of Philadelphia and multiple other teams. I know right now the Phillies have been the team that's kind of been in their way. But looking at this team right now, adding in Chris Sale, adding in a couple of other depth players as well, how did you kind of outlook, the Braves going into this season? Because to me, outside the Dodgers, this is a team that I know for a fact they are the ones that are going to be sneaking. They've been down the last couple of years, but they are not completely out. They find ways to win. How do you kind of outlook with this Braves team this year?
Yeah, it's World Series or bust. Look, that's what everybody was talking about coming into camp, coming into spring training. This is a team that's built to win a World Series now, and it has been for years. They just unfortunately haven't gotten it done in the postseason the last couple seasons, getting knocked out by the Phillies in that first round. It's crazy how baseball works. It's sometimes when you're playing and how you're playing at a certain time that dictates the game and the postseason. I guess it can be the same for other sports as well. You want to be playing your best ball, whatever sport it may be, at the end of a season. But the Braves were the best team in the regular season last year. You won't find a person that won't tell you the Braves were the best team in the regular season last year. They just weren't the best team in October. And that's sometimes how it works in baseball. But you go back to 2021, they were not the best team in baseball that year. I'll say it, but they were the best team in October, and they won the World Series. The two teams the last 2 years were much better than that 2021 version, but all about being hot at the right time. And one way you can do that, and one way you can try to improve your odds in that, in the sprint of a month playoff, is to try to build that depth out. And that's exactly what Chris Sale was. It was, adding pieces back to the bullpen and getting another arm like an Aaron Bummer, going out and getting a Jared Kelenic and an Adam Duvall to help with your depth in the lineup. And you've seen it already with Spencer Strider out for the entire year. It's already taken a huge chunk out of your rotation, but now you have somebody like Chris Sale to kind of fill that in and add to that depth. And you're still going to have to hope that some others can help you get through the grind of the regular season, but it still gives you a Max Fried, a Chris Sale, a Charlie Morton, who has been there before, Ronaldo Lopez looking great early on. And that's really what is key to Major League Baseball team in general. When it is such a long season, 162, there's going to be attrition. It's having that depth. I think the Braves have it more than anybody. I think even the Dodgers. I think the Braves have more overall depth than them right now. Obviously, very good team. In my mind, it's the Braves, Phillies, and the Dodgers. I think they're going to be three of the best teams in baseball once everything is said and done. The Dodgers have taken their lumps here lately, but obviously they have a very talented roster. But what the Atlanta Braves front office has done and going out and just creating depth and trying to make sure there are no holes in this team, and then they can withstand losing a Spencer Strider like they already have. They lost their starting catcher, Sean Murphy, on opening day. They lost their starting second baseman, Ozzie Albies, a week ago, and they've still been able to win games just because of the depth of this team. And look, that's all you can do. Some things are kind of out of your control once it comes to postseason time in terms of how you're playing at that moment, but in creating as much depth as you can to prepare yourself for that moment is really all the front office and fan base can ask for.
So it's a question to ask for you, because for covering the Braves as long as you have, I feel like, the last few years watching this Braves clubhouse kind of reminds me of the Braves of the 90s when you had Bobby Cox and you had, the best rotation with John Smoltz, Tom Glavine and Greg Maddux. And then you had a really good lineup with Chipper Jones and Andrew Jones. Is there some similarities that you're kind of picking up from the 90s group you saw and then this group in the last few seasons and to now? I mean, because I feel like every game to the Braves game is such a grind, but it's so exciting. Like they always kind of give you a reason to love baseball. Is there some similarities you kind of point out from the 90s to this group now?
There certainly are some similarities. This may be a hot take. This version to me is better. Especially if Spencer Strider were healthy and he was there, and Max Fried pitching like he is, and Chris Sale, or Max Fried pitching like he's capable. He's been off to a slow start, and Chris Sale's pitching like he has so far. This lineup is better. This lineup's maybe one of the best offenses in baseball. Last year, they broke the record for slugging percentage in a season, and it looks like they might do it again this year. So the offense is definitely better. you can't really say that rotation is better. You're talking about 3 Hall of Famers, but still, Strider, when he's healthy at his best, I mean, he was a Cy Young favorite coming in. Max Fried's finished top 3 in the Cy Young voting in 2 of the past 4 years. And Chris Sale finally looks healthy and looks good. So I would say this team is even better. The one comparison I'd make to this is, and this may be to their detriment when it comes postseason time, it's just they go out every day and do their job. And that's a compliment to them. The fact that they don't get let down by a bad game, a bad couple of games. They just go out every day and they do their job, and they know their talent's going to play out over time. When it comes to postseason, though, every game has to be more, and it has to be just that more intense. And sometimes I feel like that's been missing the last couple of postseason, because it is just a workman-like team where they're going to go out, they're going to play their game, they're going to take their at-bats, they're going to have good at-bats, and most of the time they're going to get results. But when it comes postseason time, you got to have that urgency. You got to have that intensity from the jump. And like the last 2 postseasons, that's kind of been missing.
It's funny because even when I look at the entirety of this group, and I'm watching Brian Snitker, and it just feels like, I mean, to me personally, he feels like this generation's Bobby Cox. Like, what do you kind of see in Brian Snitker for as long as managing this Braves team? And what separates him from a lot of these managers in this league? Because I'm getting full confidence, I'm getting calm, I'm getting more precise. Like, how do you kind of break down, the game of Brian Snitker's mind when it comes to building that complete team, and a team that can rise to the top to become champions?
When you talk about Bobby Cox and Brian Snitker, I think they are mirror images of each other for the most part, in the fact that one key thing about both those guys is trust. They're going to allow a guy to go through a slump and allow them to work through it, knowing their talent is going to play out. Nobody trusts a player more than Bobby Cox and Brian Snitker. And the other huge thing you hear is just these guys want to play for him. Brian Snitker, look, he's been in the Braves organization for a long time before he got his opportunity. And many Braves fans didn't think it was the right call, didn't think he was an actual good X's and O's manager. And, there certainly can be some questioning there. But one thing you cannot question, those players love to play for Brian Snitker. And in today's game, where a lot of the managing work is done, a lot of the roster construction is done by the front office, by the analytical staff, the key part of any manager is being able to rally your guys together, to have somebody that they can trust, being a leader. And that is really the most important part in today's game of being a manager. And I think Brian Snitker does that as well as anybody. He's going to take up for his guys. He trusts his guys, like I said. And they say, you hear them all say, we want to play for Brian Snitker. We love playing for him. And in my mind, that is the most important thing in today's game when it comes to a manager, when you're dealing with a lot of different personalities, a lot of talented people, being able to have a manager that you can rally around, that is going to have your back no matter what, who is not going to give up on you when you're going through a 1-for-18 slump like Matt Olson is right now. He's going to continue to put you out there, allow you to work through that. That, to me, is what makes Brian Snitker such a great manager.
And see, it's funny because I've always pushed for this, because a lot of people want to get analytical these days, which to me personally, I think it's cute. I think it's, something I'm like, but when you talk about manalytics, it's about being in the moment. It's about being coached. It's about coming out of your comfort zone and be the best version of yourself. And I think that's kind of the best thing when I look at, baseball's a perfect example. I don't know what life's going to throw to me, at the mound. When I'm there on the plate, I got to adjust it to so many different ways. And having that kind of manager is such a pivotal role, because that's the kind that wants to get the best out of you when you can honestly see it within yourself. And then that's, I think, what's the most important quality. And I think that's one that many, many teams would love to have a manager like that. So I know it may be too early to kind of predict the future up in this one, because we just started the season. But going back to that World Series team, right? I felt like the moves that they made during the trade deadline, when they got Jack Peterson and they got Jorge Soler, they got those extra oomph for them to really get over the top and be World Series champions. Do you feel like come the trade deadline, I know it's too early, But do you think that might be on the minds for the Braves to maybe find that pivotal piece that can help to put them over the edge?
I think they would like to. There's a couple of key pieces in place here. One is that they are really close up to the third luxury tax threshold, which would include more strict penalties, and it would move back their draft pick 10 spots. So far, they've been hesitant to go over that, and just where they've ended up with the luxury tax payroll, it would make you think that they would like to not go over that. So that may dictate a little bit of how much they can do. The loss of Spencer Strider, though, and obviously, as you said, it's early. There's a long time now between now and the trade deadline, and other things could happen. Other injuries could pop up. You're not going to replace a Spencer Strider, but if you could at least get another middle rotation type of arm to just improve that quality of depth in the rotation in case something happens at the final 2 months of the year and you lose another starter. I think looking right now, obviously in mid-April, that's something I think the Atlanta Braves need to be looking at and focusing on. Is there going to be a starting pitcher available like that? Do they have a starting pitcher out there that they can afford like that to at least give them a little bit more insurance in the rotation? Again, you're not going to replace Spencer Strider, but you'd love to go out and at least get another valuable starter, a confident starter that you can rely on, like the Rangers did with Jordan Montgomery last year, going out and getting the guy like that you can stick in the middle rotation, you know, is going to give you solid innings and give that offense, which, like I said, is a historically good offense, a chance to win. That's really all this Braves team needs. So there's one thing that I look at right now that the Braves will be focusing on. It'd be finding that middle to top of the rotation arm at the deadline to kind of improve that depth with the loss of Spencer Strider.
Yeah, it's going to be great stuff, man. And like we've always talked about, it's a long haul ahead. You know, you kind of have to get through, you know, the dog days of summer. And then eventually when you start coming to August, September, October, that's when you really find that identity. You got exactly the pieces from there. Now it's time to go on a tear and go on a roll and eventually come back to being hungry for that World Series, you know, appearance. And so I think the Braves could do it. I mean, baseball's so unpredictable, right? We could have loaded rosters, but it's all about getting through the grinds to eventually show them the reason why they were put together as a World Series team. So appreciate it, Jake, man. All the great content for you. Where can people find everything Atlanta Braves?
Yeah, so you can find me on social media, on Twitter or X at shortstopball. You can find the podcast there at @LockedOn_Braves. Also find the podcast on YouTube at Locked On Braves there, and we're on your any podcast feed, pretty much whatever you get your podcast, Locked On Braves.
I will tell you, man, I've got a good friend of mine living in the Atlanta area, and I've got a lot of Atlanta Braves fans of my own. And so saving this interview clip, they're going to absolutely love it, man. But chop on, man. It's a long season. We'll see what happens with the Braves moving forward.
All right. Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. You bet. Yeah, it's like I said, I love it when it's, you know, this time of year, the weather's beautiful, you know, it's calming, it's much more, you know, consistent. And I think that's what we love about it, you know, and, you know, we talk about the dog days of summer, you know, it's one of those things. Yeah, you deal with a lot of the adversities all through in the middle, but if you get them out early and then you start to go into, you know, the streak runs, which usually a lot of teams tend to do in baseball, I think that's where you really kind of get a gist of the identity. And I think that's what's most important from here on out. But I'm excited about it for this baseball season. And the Braves were definitely a team that I just had like a lot of really good stuff to really kind of break down. And so I'm excited about it. We'll see what happens throughout, you know, the dog days of summer. But you can count on it. This is going to be a very, very interesting season ahead of us. Can't wait for it. So, all righty, folks. Well, I've been talking to you a lot about all of the latest that BetUS has given us all throughout playoff action. And with Major League Baseball in full swing. And, man, we're pitching all of our best bet lines to all of you guys. The NBA playoffs, Stanley Cup playoffs for all of our hockey heads out there, and Major League Baseball fans, far and wide. BetUS has been doing this for 30-plus years, and they have not stopped short. Go online to BetUS.com and check out all of the best expertise, analysis, and all of your favorite sports book betting lines possible for you guys to get into the game, get your best bets possible for you to score big. And when you do, when you put $50 down or more in your deposit, BetUS will give you 200% in your bonuses, along with 30 risk-free bets as well to go on top of it. Sounds like a great deal, right? So check out BetUS.com and also check out their casino line as well. For a lot of them that love slot machines, love blackjack, many other casino entertainments as well. They've got it all for you guys. And note for those of you got a gambling problem, call one of your listings there here in your area and seek out some help. Don't want to end up, causing any more of the, issues. We want to make sure everybody's all level-headed. Go online to BetUS.com. BetUS, where the game begins.
Listen up, sports fans. Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. We've also got hundreds of new casino games, including the coolest new European slots, and our live dealers are waiting for you at the table. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action. BetUS, where the game begins.
Coverage around the world of sports, jam-packed with an all-star interview lineup, then the best place to find it all, sports and entertainment, is right here. Join Jake Silva on the Snake Sports Talk Show, presented by SeatGeek and BetUS. Weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on Sports Wave Network.
Appreciate all of our guests who came on here on the show. This will be my show till Friday because I'm getting geared up. I'm getting some well-needed rest, and I'm going to be focused for the NFL draft come Thursday night. And you already know exactly what time it is. So, folks, my third and final NFL mock draft. I have it from here. I think we kind of have an idea what some teams are going to take. Now, I don't think this is honestly going to be 110% accurate, but we have an idea what could possibly happen up and on the draft night. Lots of surprises, lots of different changes all the way through. So, without further ado, our third and final NFL mock draft. Give me your thoughts. Give me your give me exactly anything you guys can throw up at me. I'm excited about it, but here we go. As you already know right now, I still have the Chicago Bears taking Caleb Williams. There's no question. I don't see them potentially moving off of that pick at all. Like I said, he's a game changer. He's a game player. And honestly, I think the Bears have moved in the right direction, fixing up on offense. They've got defense. It'll be interesting to see exactly how the night really kind of plays out. But I got Caleb at number 1. Number 2 overall pick still stays the same. I'm taking Jaden Daniels from LSU, the quarterback in the Washington Commanders. The thought process of this is that Cliff Kingsbury wants a Kyler Murray-esque type player, a kind of guy that's got a good throwing arm, a guy that's elusive out of the pocket for a team that was literally dead last in offensive line last season. And I think this is honestly the perfect pick. You got an offense, you got something to work with, and honestly, I think Jaden Daniels is the best that you can honestly get from this point forward. Number 3 pick up in the draft, and I do believe this is a possibility for the New England Patriots. I don't see them moving out. I see them taking Drake May from North Carolina, because in the end, offenses, you could go and address those later up onto the rounds. But what you cannot address, which is very hard to do, is finding your franchise quarterback late. I think you go and you get your potential franchise quarterback, which they do have a decent offensive line. Left tackle is the need, and I think this is exactly what the Patriots will need. They need somebody to match up well against Tua and the Dolphins, against Josh Allen and the Bills, and Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. And I think, honestly, Drake May, you get him there, gives the Patriots a little bit of a viable reason to be competitive. 4 overall pick, because of the asking price for the Arizona Cardinals, I have them taking Marvin Harrison Jr. because ultimately Kyler Murray, they're not going to end up addressing quarterback. I don't know why that narrative was even thrown up out there, but I think you roll with Kyler Murray for the time being, but you go and give him a playmaker, and that's exactly what Marvin Harrison Jr. does. I think in the end, they get at least the best playmaker. They get somebody that can honestly elevate this organization next to Kyler Murray, and I think it'll be interesting to see at number 4. Alert, as you know, because I still have the Chargers potentially trading that number 5 pick to the Minnesota Vikings to get at least some draft capital. Now, there is rumor talks about potentially the Atlanta Falcons moving from 8 to 11 because of a tampering call. But in the end, I've got the Vikings taking J.J. McCarthy because in the end, it's a really good loaded offense, something that I think works perfectly for the Vikings and for J.J. McCarthy because he's got an offensive coach. You've got an offensive weaponry overhaul, and I think you can address the offensive line at the same time. They got some good defensive pieces. I think you could build upon that in the end all throughout the later rounds. Number 6 pick, and I know a lot of people have predicted about this, so have I. I'm taking the New York Giants to going and taking Malik Neighbors because we know Daniel Jones is not the right answer with that quarterback, but the least you could do for the Giants, you've got an overhaul of a pass rush, completed package, but in the end, you go and give them a playmaker because they have not had any playmaker at wide receiver in a long time since OBJ and a couple others. I mean, I like Sterling Shepard and I do like Darius Slayton, but it's not enough. I think in the end, you got to give a promising factor for the Giants. You go and give them a playmaker. They can address quarterback a little bit later on because there are some quarterbacks a little bit later in the draft. So keep your eye on the Giants a little later on, but they go and take Malik Neighbors. And, of course, the obvious pick for the Tennessee Titans is addressing that tackle position. They go and get Joe Alt because if you want Will Levis to work, you need to buy him time in the pocket, and I think that is what they do. They got Peter Skoronski last year addressing the one side of the tackle position. Now they're going to focus on the other, and then at that point, you could go get interior guards. They ended up paying for at least a couple of them. So it'll be interesting to see what the Titans do, but they do have an offense. It's decent. I don't know if it's one that could basically trounce the Texans or maybe trounce the Jaguars. I mean, they could probably go back and forth, but I think could be very interesting in the South this up-and-coming season. I got them taking Joe Alt. The Atlanta Falcons, I'm still waiting to hear exactly up on the news of it, but if the rumors are true, they might lose it. But for now, I have them still at number 8, and I have them taking Dallas Turner. Now, one time I had them taking Jarrett Burst, which is not a bad option either. There has been mixtures of both of them. But, it's clear that the Falcons needed to end up addressing that edge rushing position because there are some guys that are kind of getting up there in age, but you need somebody that's younger, that's faster, that's powerful, and a guy that I think could really boost up what they fixed last season, and that was the defensive side of the ball, getting Jesse Bates and getting a couple of other really good players and still having A.J. Terrell. I have them taking Dallas Turner at 8. This might shock some people, and it's a possibility, but the Chicago Bears, if all doesn't seem to work out with as far as trade value, I have them maybe potentially, instead of an edge rusher like I would anticipate, I have them taking a wide receiver instead, and they take Rome Odunze. Now, that might piss off the Jets in some ways, but in the end, I think, honestly, Rome Odunze, you keep giving Caleb Williams some offense so that way then it guarantees this offense is going to work. Rome Odunze is a workaholic. He's a guy that wants to get better at his game. Really good route runner, really good hands. I think in the end, he also plays really good contested ball, so I'll have them take him at number 9. New York Jets, I don't know if a lot of people think it's a sexy pick, but honestly, I think if you're going to keep Aaron Rodgers up onto the field, you might as well go ahead and keep your depth rolling at offensive line. I have them taking Olu Fashanu at number 10. Because, yes, they did address the tackle position, but why not build a little bit more depth? I'm hearing a lot with the Chargers that are basically doing the same thing. And then I'm also hearing, a couple of other teams that are also looking for offensive tackles. So why not get up on that train? Because if Aaron Rodgers is what everybody says that he will be with the Jets, then you better guarantee, just like Brady and just like a couple of other quarterbacks, you need to give him protection inside that line. And so I think Olu Fashanu, the size, the build, the hands, and really just the elusiveness of protecting on that side of the ball, I think that's ultimately what the Jets are really going to end up liking from here, and it makes up for the Mekhi Becton pick. Chargers initially ended up moving from 5 to 11. I think they go and they take the best player, collegiate, all-around player, Brock Bowers at number 11 as their tight end out of Georgia, because the one thing they need is they need an elite player, and they've said it before with Joe Ortiz. They said, as long as the price is right and we can afford that with the number 5 pick, we could come to that agreement, because they felt like that their pick is the number 1 overall pick outside of quarterback. And I think they're right. So I think you go and get the best collegiate prospect all around the nation, and that's Brock Bowers. He gives you size, gives you blocks, gives you catches, and he gives you more elusiveness. But I think the one thing he needs to work on is a little of the route running, but he's not that far off. And I think in the end, you're doing Justin Herbert a solid. You're giving him a tight end. You're giving him an elite playmaker at the highest level who has been balls to the wall, from his freshman season. So I think in the end, you take the best collegiate player possible. That's Brock Bowers at 11. Pick, and at least the Broncos are playing situational football, and that's what they're doing with Bo Nix, because in the end, Bo Nix, a lot of people don't feel like is going to translate into the NFL level. I disagree. I think he's one of my sleepers as well in the draft, because this is a guy that has a lot of experiences, has just about the similar size as a Drew Brees type. But I think Sean Payton is honestly going to love his work ethic. He's coachable, and he's also somebody that could really work up on his game. I have Bo Nix at number 12, helping with the Denver Broncos. Alert, and this is interesting for some people, but I do have the Las Vegas Raiders trading with the Seattle Seahawks. And the Seahawks, this will be interesting, but it's also not crazy. I think they go and they take an edge rusher in this one to pair up with Achino Osu, get a little bit more defense up on there, because that's what Mike McDonald loves. And I think they go and get Jared Verse from Florida State. He just a little along the lines with Dallas Turner. He provides a little bit more elusiveness. He's quick. He's also somebody that could get around from the offensive line. And I think this is kind of what Seattle has always kind of pushed upon for the last few years. And Mike McDonald now being a part of that, expect it, because I honestly think this could be a Mike McDonald pick. And I think Snyder also knows that as well. So I don't think this is a bad pick at all for the Seattle Seahawks, but anticipate this possibly happening. Orleans Saints because a lot of people have been saying, well, do they go defense? Do they go offense? Honestly, I mean, you got to protect that line as much as possible, even if Derek Carr doesn't seem to be like the right answer. But you go and get Talisi Fuaga. I think, honestly, the Oregon State product, much like Alou Fashanu and Joe Alt, you know what you're going to get from as far as great hands, great feet, and even with the body size that he has, he's also another one of those top tackles in the country that I think honestly could give New Orleans a little bit more of hope and then also more time in the pocket to be a little bit more poised. But you could also address the quarterback even later on. Who knows? But I think you honestly have to stay consistent with that offensive line. I take him right there at that pick. The Indianapolis Colts, because they have at least, that pick itself and it laid right to their lap, I think you take the best corner possible, and that's Terrion Arnold. Now, I did speak with, Q early on in the show, and that's kind of the pick I anticipated as well for the Raiders, but because they traded back, they are not in panic mode. They're going to get the best corner possible and available, but I think Terrion Arnold for the Colts makes a lot of sense. They're making up with losing Stephon Gilmore, and at least, with the backfield, that's exactly with what I think the Colts are going to end up doing. I like that pick with Terrion Arnold. Now, with the Raiders pick already traded with the Seattle Seahawks, I see potentially them, and it may not end up being that pick, but I see them maybe potentially taking Nate Wiggins. Now, he's also another one that's a real good shutdown corner. I don't know exactly as far as high value as being a mid-round pick in the first round, but he's ultimately a guy that still provides you very good coverages, a guy from Clemson that at least, they've produced a product that I think could very much give you a lot of that disruption on the offense and really make more of a contested role for the opposing receivers. So I think that may be a possibility for the Raiders in the mid-round. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars, this is interesting because then they trade with the Philadelphia Eagles. They move up to 17, and they go and take Quinion Mitchell. I don't think this is crazy because in the end, the Eagles either would want to end up going up to then get the next corner available because either Kool-Aid McKinstry might not end up being there, or they might actually think about this guy being a ball hawk. Quinion Mitchell is my draft year's Tariq Woolen this year because honestly, he's a ball hawk. He's a guy that gives you a lot of contested pressures and is a guy that has a very good percentage efficiency against offenses. And so I think Quinion Mitchell is going to be the real deal coming out of Toledo. He's my favorite pick, honestly, in the draft. So anybody that drafts him, whether it's the Colts, the Raiders, or the Eagles, those are three teams that are big up on defenses, and they will find a gem right there. I have the Eagles potentially taking Quinion Mitchell there. The Cincinnati Bengals have an interesting yet, at the same time, an exciting pick there at 18, and I have them taking a defensive tackle, and I have them taking Byron Murphy because in the end, they've lost DJ Reader. They lost, important guys up front. So the defense was going to get decimated because they lost a lot of really good key pieces. But I think you make this up with getting Byron Murphy there at the nose tackle because in the end, you got to give Trey Hendrickson a little bit more support. And even when you got Logan Wilson there in the linebacking position, I think this is the pick that I think everybody in Cincinnati is hoping for. Now, of course, the question is what's going to happen with T. Higgins. I haven't heard anything much, but they're saying he might stay. So if that's the case, maybe you go and get yourself a defensive tackle and the best one there at that pick. The LA Rams certainly want a dynamic playmaker, and it's been a long time since the Rams had gotten a first-round pick. I think they honestly use it with the hometown kid, Elia Tulatu. And I think, honestly, he is probably a little of an Aaron Donald-esque type of player because, one, he's very dynamic when it comes to shaving off a lot of the blocks from the opposing offenses. He's a guy that provides a lot of power and a guy that also provides a lot of disruption for opposing offenses, especially stopping the run and getting to the quarterback. I watched so many tapes upon this kid. This kid is also another one of my favorite picks, and I think, honestly, the Rams make a lot of sense to me. keeping a kid out there in UCLA, doesn't have to go far. I think he really does fit well. And Sean McVay is going to absolutely love filling in a potential Hall of Famer that they've got already, first ballot Hall of Famer. I think they make this up with this pick with Laiatulatu, and I think he will definitely fit in the culture that the Rams have instilled for years. Pittsburgh Steelers, they honestly need to end up addressing that offensive line. It's not a changed pick. I honestly have them taking J.C. Latham at Alabama because they need to get protection for Russell Wilson. But not only that, efficiency on the run game with Najee Harris. Now, they had a terrible offensive line, but they were still able to run the football. They didn't cough the football up at all. In fact, the efficiency when it came to potential fumbles has been the less amount than the NFL. So they have not coughed up the football, especially with their run game, but I think you add on a little bit more beef and more power in that offensive line, and I think they do that with getting J.C. Latham. The Miami Dolphins have an interesting pick, though, as well, and I am taking him again. This is probably the second time, but I have them taking Jerzon Newton because they need to fill in that hole that they lost with Christian Wilkins. So eventually, I think, honestly, you end up making up with this pick and getting Newton, and I think he had some very, very good efficiencies at Illinois, watching his tape and watching exactly what he's got. Now, Byron Murphy, I know, is the top pick, but in the end, I think Jerzon Newton is a very good complementary pick as well for the Dolphins, and he is somebody that I think along those lines, a run disruptor, a guy that can get to the quarterback and really is giving you a little bit more hope that Jalen Phillips coming back from that injury will help with the rest of that front line of that defense. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they ended up moving back up on the pick, and honestly, I would not be surprised if this is the answer for them, but I think they go with Brian Thomas II. I had them taking Keon Coleman a couple times, but I think this is interesting because in the end, you can't never say never on offense because in the end, you're trying to beat Houston, you're trying to beat the Colts, and you're trying to beat the Titans. It was an embarrassing year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, they do still have a solid O-line. They could probably address it later up onto the rounds, but I think if you go and get a receiver from this pick, I think ultimately you're doing yourself a favor, and it's also going to help out with Trevor Lawrence to give him another weapon to utilize on the field. Chargers at 23. This is an interesting one because I have heard offensive line, and I think ultimately they go in and get the best offensive tackle really available left, and I think they go and get Troy Fautanu. And I think, honestly, I mean, not a lot of people might agree with this pick, but in the end, you're getting, at the very least, size. You're getting mobility as well when it comes to protecting that line because in the end, the Chargers are trying to do Justin Herbert a favor where they're getting a healthier O-line, and at the end, you've got a dynamic playmaker. They can go and get another one again in the second round because there are some receivers that might fall into there, but I think this is ultimately the right pick for offensive tackle, and then you could either address going and getting a center, or you could go and get another receiver in the end. Dallas Cowboys, because the biggest thing of it is they're not going to pay Dak, and who knows if they're going to pay Micah Parsons. They definitely should end up paying CeeDee Lamb. So in the end, you should beef up that offensive line, and I think they go and get Amarius Mims from Georgia. I had them taking Tyler Guyton and a couple of other options from there. I think, honestly, Amarius Mims might be an interesting pick for the Cowboys. But you have to come to terms with reality of what the Cowboys are. And right now, it's not looking great. It's not looking fresh. But you could guarantee you need to keep that offensive line healthy because whomever is going to be the quarterback for the future, at least you got a protective O-line, give them an efficient run game later up into the rounds. But you got to give him something and even a receiver, because in the end, you're crossing your fingers CeeDee Lamb doesn't suffer an injury because otherwise it's going to be a tire fire from here for the Cowboys. But I think the guarantee is keep up that offensive line to be consistent, and whomever quarterbacks will definitely make a difference for the Cowboys move. No changes at all for the Green Bay Packers. I still have them taking Cooper DeJean up in here because in the end, they're going to take a safety and they're going to take the best safety available. Cooper DeJean is a guy that is a disruptor and somebody that the Packers could definitely like to find the replacement, especially after losing a quality safety. So I think Cooper DeJean is the answer. No changes from there. I have him going to the Packers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers here in this position, I think they go and they get the edge rusher after they lost a lot of their defensive pieces, and I think they go and get Chop Robinson. A real good, perfect answer for sure for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they want to get younger at defense. They've established an offense. I think they can go and address a little bit more, but I think you need to get younger, you need to get faster, and you need to get stronger up on defense. And I think Chop Robinson is a really good pick for the Buccaneers if he falls to them. Arizona Cardinals at 27. As I've said, they go and get their wide receiver. Now you go and get protection for Kyler Murray, and you go and take Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma. Not a bad pick, honestly, because in the end, you're going to guarantee that there's some protection for the sides so that Kyler Murray's not always running for his life up out there. But in the end, you're going to give him enough time up in the pocket to be poised, and at least you got a dynamic playmaking receiver that's there in the early round of number 4. Now you go and you address the offensive tackle, and the rest of it you could definitely end up addressing later on. The Buffalo Bills, of course, they're not in panic mode, but they do end up getting a wide receiver as promised, and they go and get Xavier Worthy. They go and get that quick receiver out of Texas. Now, again, I love his feet work, and I love the fact that he could run those deep ball routes, much like a Tyreek Hill-esque type player. But, of course, the hands are the question. He's got decent hands. He's got real good hands that can basically get over-the-shoulder catches. And that's something that Josh Allen, he's been throwing the deep ball too, so you got to get a replacement for Stephon Diggs. I think they could go and get another receiver for at least a little bit of a double whammy, but I think you go and get the first one, and that's ultimately what they find in Xavier Worthy. Detroit Lions, it may not end up surprising me up into this one if this was to happen, but I could see potentially them going and getting their corner replacement after they lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Cam Sutton. I think they go and get Kool-Aid McKinstry because if he falls this far, I mean, a lot of people might end up thinking, well, what's wrong with him? But in the end, I mean, you've got Brian Branch there in the secondary, so I think if you add him along with a Branch, I think Kool-Aid McKinstry could definitely give you some quality outings up onto the secondary and give you much more of a quality cover at corner. Baltimore Ravens have not changed their pick at all. I still have them going with Graham Barton out of Duke at their interior guard position because they still need to protect that interior for Lamar Jackson in the run game at all costs. And I think this is honestly the pick that feels right for the Ravens. No panic there. No change at all. This might shock some people, but if in fact that Brandon Ayuk was to be traded, it might end up changing the boards. It might end up doing this, but I feel like that if you're going to get another receiver up in here, they may end up going and getting Keon Coleman. Now, people might think I'm nuts, I'm crazy, but you still have offensive tackles you could address in the second round. So it's not like it's an entire dire need, but yes, that they should end up getting an offensive tackle, even if it's in the first or the second round, whatever the case may be for the 49ers. But this will be interesting if this is how the pot shakes up, because if they go and get Keon Coleman with their first pick, whoa, that might be very interesting. And I don't know what's up John Lynch's sleeve. For the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, they go and take Adonai Mitchell, the wide receiver out of Texas. They lose out up on Xavier Worthy. They're going to end up getting a receiver. This is what's been told. I don't see them going anywhere else from here, but I think the Kansas City Chiefs, they need to fix up that wide receiver department, get some dynamic players for Patrick Mahomes to end up throwing to, because Travis Kelce, he's not getting any younger, still dynamic, but at the same time, you want to end up addressing that wide receiver room at all costs. All right, folks. Well, the third and final mock draft. I was excited about this one, but we do have at the very least an idea of what we're looking at come draft night on Thursday. These may not end up being exactly the picks, mind you, but we do have an idea what teams' needs are, what teams' wants are. And I think in the end, you're going to definitely love with how this is honestly going to end up playing out at the very end. I'm excited for draft night. No show Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Don't bother me. I'm going to be enjoying the draft night as much as possible. I've got a good friend of mine I'll be guest hosting with for the NFL draft night. And so it'll be very interesting and very fun to watch. You don't want to end up missing that. I will have all of the rest of my thoughts come Friday. So I appreciate all of you guys for being up here in tonight. And a big special thank you to your boy Q Myers and Jake Mastroianni for joining us here up onto the show with locking on those Raiders and locking on the Bravos. So really appreciated their guys' time. Appreciate all of you guys for jumping on in. Like, follow, subscribe, hit the bell button. Keep you up to date on future and past shows. I will have a show on Friday. So get geared up, folks. Draft night is going to be one hell of a night. I'm excited about it, and so should you. Enjoy the show, and I know I'm going to be. So who knows what fate has in store for all the team and for all the players. But I wish the best of luck. Everybody that gets drafted. A once-in-a-lifetime feeling for all of these great athletes. So let's see what the NFL draft has in store for us. Big Silva signing off. A great rest of the night, and we'll see you guys Friday here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. See you later, guys.